Well, guys, it's 10 a.m. and this is Lancaster Woodturners Coffee Hour for April 14th, 2022. I think it's number 98, but I'm not sure. My name's John Kelsey of Lancaster Area Woodturners. I'll be your moderator today, as most weeks. And today is not a show and tell week. Today is a guest star week, and our guest star is Jack Vesery. And what I'm gonna do is spotlight me and Jack so we can have a conversation after Jack does a little slideshow. And my co-host Bowman is going to keep track of the gallery so we can see people waving their hands who want to jump into the conversation, because we'd like to have a multi-way conversation and learn about Jack's career and his work and his ideas. Just to let you know, Jack won the Pop Merit Award for Lifetime Achievement back in 2015, and there's a profile of him in the journal for the June journal of that year. Is it 15 or 16, Jack?
Yes.
Okay.
I think 15. I think 15, it was 15.
I think
Yeah.
15 also. So let's see, unless somebody's got something they're dying to say or ask that they need to bring out right now, I'm going to give the floor over to Jack for your introduction, and I'm going to spotlight you to do that. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, sure.
All right. We do like to start on time, so they're going to click in while they do, but I'm going to spotlight you for everybody now.
Okay, so I'll just start with the introduction that, as John said, Jack Vesery, everybody calls me Jack. My real name is Jacques. I was born with that name, named after my grandfather. I've been in Maine for 30 years, never lived any place longer than I've lived here. And before that, I lived in New Jersey. I grew up in North Jersey in Bergen County, so not too far away from most of you guys. Did a lot of things in my life so far. We'll talk about that. I'm sure that'll come up. And I'm just happy to join you guys for the hour and chat. So it should be fun. Yeah, don't hesitate with questions. Hopefully we won't get too much technical stuff that people want to know about, but we'll do as much as we can. So I'm going to just screen share for a second here.
I'm good.
Yeah, give us a little slideshow so we can get a sense of that.
She's out for the moment.
Perfect.
So,
just a second. Judy Stone, please mute yourself. Okay. Go for it, Jack.
okay, so I'm just going to show you a couple random things, starting with sort of earlier work. But when I broke away from
Say that again.
doing what everybody else was doing, the segmented stuff and things that were just out of the regular wood turning things, and realized that I wanted to get a little more creative in what I did and put a little more of my own voice in the work, and started doing more textures and coloring, and created sort of a something that wasn't out there for the most part, and just experimenting. And this was prior to, it was like 97, 1997, when I started experimenting and getting away from the looks like everybody else's stuff.
So you were a real pioneer in all that.
Well, so I mean, I don't know. I can tell you this. I can say, if I look back, there was very few people doing texture and color. Like John Jordan was doing texture, and that was a big influence in wanting to do things like that. But most of his textures are black or wood. Of course, there was Frank Sudol and Ben Bow doing pierced work with some coloring and some pyrography. And I started just experimenting with first carving textures. Then I'm pretty sure I'm the first person to ever use a wood burner to actually sculpt the wood. Because when I talk about people say pyrography, and I say, it's not, what I do is not pyrography. I'm using a sharp, hot knife to cut material.
Well,
and
how much wood?
the surface.
How much wood can you cut at a time with that? How deep can you go?
Quite a bit. And hopefully we'll have time. I actually out of frustration over the years of not having a wood burner do what I wanted to do, I've come up with one in conjunction with a electrical engineer that I know. And so I think it's a unit that actually will do everything that's out there plus some. And, so if you want to really vaporize wood with this, you can, but it's not a battery charger that you've converted to make it into a wood vaporizer. But it still does pyrography. Well, we'll talk about that later. But so the thing is that I started with a little tiny wood burner. It took forever to do the sculpting. I started learning how to do it faster. I started doing things like adding extra tools to save time. So instead of having one rotary shaft tool, like a Fordham, I have 3 and 3 foot pedals. So instead of changing hand pieces and bits, I just pick up another cable and keep going. So all of those things had to come into play. But I think if you see anybody out there now who's doing texture and color, they probably either took a class with me or they were influenced by a demo or something along those lines. Dixie Biggs was one of my first students at Aramont. She never did color until that class.
Fabulous.
So, let's just look at a couple more things here and then we'll go on. So I always like showing this piece because it has a couple things that I like to talk about. This is a very small piece. You can see it's 2.5 inches by almost 2.5 inches. But during the time of doing these pieces where I broke away from doing conservative, conventional forms that we're used to, the hollow form, the bowl, and started doing more sculptural work. But I based a lot of my forms for the sculptural work on a classic form from history. So basically it's an amphora that hasn't been hollowed out, and then creating some negative space on the surface and creating a pattern that fits and grows with the surface of the piece is really important to me. And
it looks like a logarithmic spiral or a logarithmic spiral, or what do you call it anyway? Golden mean spiral.
Yeah. So almost everything I do in my work is based off of the golden rectangle, the golden mean, the golden rule, all of those aspects. I'm always thinking about the Fibonacci numbers and how things correlate to fit together to make the object look like you didn't make it. My goal is always to create something that no one questions. So when I make a piece like this one, no one ever said to me, okay, so you made a seashell and you put feathers on the outside. I don't get it. Because what happens in my mind, what happens here, and this is my goal, is I'm tricking your brain into thinking this grew out of something. You don't question that there's feathers on a sea form. And I say sea form because you're never going to find a seashell that looks like any of the ones that I make. I use seashells as an inspiration, but I don't look at them to create the objects that are seashell-like. So I call them sea forms because they're just out of my head. And I've had people say, well, no, I think I've seen a shell like that on, somewhere. And I say, not on this planet, you haven't. So.
Well, I notice you've also completely dematerialized the wood.
Almost always. And it's not because I don't like wood. It's just that I convinced myself that I don't need to show the wood. I don't get a lot of fantastic wood in Maine. I get some good wood and, I'll make a salad bowl once in a while, but most of the time I get pretty bland stuff. And cherry that grows in Maine it never gets the patina that you guys get in Pennsylvania cherry. So nobody uses it here. And so I'll get a 5-6 foot log from somebody who's cutting a cherry tree down. They're going to use it for firewood. So that's perfect for me. It's bland cherry. It's the material I want to use, and it works perfect. It's middle of the road. It's not too hard. It's not too soft. It holds a good crisp line in the texturing techniques that I use.
Is it very tight growth ring?
It's pretty tight. Yeah. The thing is that we don't get very big cherry here. So
it's slow grown because it's cold.
it's also slow growing. Yeah. So we'll get some burls in those trees, but the burls are usually crappy. You get a couple little tiny pieces out of something. But I would say that I don't think I've ever seen a cherry tree here that was bigger than like a 16-inch diameter. So I'll show you one more picture and then we'll move on. How's that? One of my favorites. So
I love that.
this is so John, Peter Korn, right?
Sure.
Okay. So Peter Korn and I were sharing a hotel room for a conference, a Collectors of Wood Art conference in Asheville. And I was hand delivering this to Delmano Gallery because they sold it to a collector. Dave Long. They sold it to Dave Long. So they said, look, instead of sending it to us, they're going to be here. Just bring it with you. So I did. So I took it out of my packaging and said to Peter Korn, I said, what do you think of this? And he just started shaking his head. And he goes, I don't like it. And I said, what do you mean you don't like it? He goes, I don't like it. You should stick to working in wood. And I was like, yes, excellent. So
brilliant. What have you made before you go away from slides? What have you been making lately?
Oh, well, that's a little bit longer story.
You can come back to that if you like.
No. So I have not been making turning per se. To make a really long story short, the last 11 years have been a little rough for me. In late in 2010, I got a virus and it turned into a chronic fatigue syndrome. And so I have not been making a lot of my artistic pieces per se. The carving tends to hurt more. I can't do it for the length of time I'd like. But what I've done in the interim is I've done projects internationally where I've gone with an association called the IWCS. They run a program yearly called World Wood Day, and it's actually 5 or 6 days. And I would go on a project that was a collaborative project that started 14 days prior to World Wood Day, which is March 21st. And I was able to do projects in China. Well, we actually started one prior to that. Terry Martin organized one in Ireland called the Irish Wall Project, and I was on that team. But then we went to China, and then when we went to Turkey the following year, I was the lead artist for that year, and we had 25 artists from 19 countries working on a project together. And if people want to see those images, we can do those at some point. Not to get bogged down with that, but I'll just show you the one. This is the one project that we did in Turkey.
I think you have to click. There it is.
Yeah. So that was the theme was a bridge, and we made a sculptural bridge. Now imagine that being done in 14 days. Yeah. So that was great, and we didn't have a plan when we got there. We did a day and a half of ideas and design, and then moved on from there. So
that's beautiful.
Thank you. So
every one of those is carved, and were they out of logs, or did you start with square timber?
So we started with square, what they call black pine. And one of the goals at these projects is to use what's local, not ship something in. And that's what they had. And people were like, we can't carve this. I was like, well, we're going to have to. And so there's 90 meters of carving in this project. And the carving only was finished in the last 3 days of the project.
Wow. And
they cut us short by 2 days because the mayor said, we originally were going to construct this inside of an antiquated building near a mosque. And they said, we think it should go outside at the entrance to the town for the opening of World Wood Days. And I went, oh, okay. So you're going to give us 3 days less to work on it. But it worked. We actually put that up at midnight of World Wood Day on March 21st in a snowstorm. And I had a guy from Palau on the team. I had a guy from the Philippines. We had 3 South African guys. Everybody, these guys were freezing. These poor guys. We were like putting layers and layers on them to keep them working.
Now, did you guys draw that all out first, or did you just draw it right on the wood?
You know what we did? We didn't draw out anything on the carving. What we did was we just said collaboratively, we said, all the carving has to look like none of us did it. So and it has to relate only to wood. So nothing from your country, nothing of your style, just carve. And it worked out really well. Nothing was drawn out. It was just people just started carving, and there was always 2 people working on every stick. Which is
did you draw out the structure itself first, or is that?
Yeah, we actually built maquettes and then drew out the structure on a wall, full size, before we did all the cutting. But all of those pieces are tapered, so they were bandsawed, planed, and they're tapered on all 4 sides. So that was crazy. But anyway. So, all right. So enough of the slides, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. For now, we can come back to them if there's call.
Yeah, anybody wants to see stuff, we can pop back.
Yeah. I want to note for a second here now that there are 58 on screen. And I'm going to keep the screen this way well, I'm trying to get this thing to go somewhere else. I'm going to keep the screen on this way so that I can see Jack and I can ask questions, but the rest of you are free to jump in. You can use raise hand, which will force us to recognize you, or you can just kind of beckon for attention, or you can send me a direct chat, which I'll see on my screen and I can call on you. And I'm going to deal with questions that are here right now, if that's okay with you, Jack. Let's do that. Yeah. Randy Smith, what do you got?
I was intrigued by the chainsaw ribbon cutting ceremony.
Okay, so the other guy holding the chainsaw is the mayor of the town. So nobody knew that, but at the ribbon cutting ceremony that they wanted to do for publicity, I brought 2 chainsaws and handed it to the mayor, who didn't speak much English, but he was like looking at me going like, what? I was like, just do what I do. And we held the chainsaws up, but we didn't actually cut the ribbon with the chainsaw. So. And wait, I have to mention this. So before I did wood turning professionally, one of my jobs was I was a park ranger and a forest firefighter for the state of New Jersey. And when my wife and I got married, she was in med school. And when the maitre d' handed us the knife to cut the cake, I said, oh, that won't do. And I took out my 24-inch Husqvarna chainsaw, and the 2 of us have a wedding picture holding the chainsaw over the cake.
Fantastic. Ron Sheehan got a hand up.
Well, just a question. I know you want to get on there, but that teapot looked like it was wrapped in leather and leather cord. Is that all one piece and carved?
So I should have mentioned that when we had it up, but that piece it's all wood. There's no leather on it. But it is made of 4 pieces of wood. So the handle is 1 piece, the body is 1 piece, the spout is a 3rd piece, and the lid is a 4th piece.
And are they?
And it's so realistic. It looks like it's wrapped in leather.
Yeah, thank you. That's my goal, is not to, is to create an illusion. So talking on that, I'm going to show you an example. So this is a stone. But it's not a stone, it's a piece of wood. So we have a lot of very round beach stones here in Maine. And I love stacking them at the beach and, making like temporary sculptures. So I said, well, why don't I make some out of wood? And so this window that's carved in is all textured, but this is 1 piece of wood. And I've had some of my peers look at this and go, okay, so you carved a hole in a rock and put in a piece of wood that you carved, but that's not true. It's 1 piece of wood. And the thing that's interesting about this and the teapot is when you pick it up, it's the wrong temperature and it's the wrong weight. So like a leather teapot probably wouldn't weigh as much as a wooden teapot, and a rock is going to weigh a lot more than a wooden rock, a real stone. So so that's part of that. To me, those little nuances that help create that illusion and become little hidden treasures that people don't realize right away.
Well, how do you finish all that stuff? How many are you using an airbrush and brushes, and how many layers and dyes, paints, pigments? What's going on?
So I'm using acrylic only, but I'm really glad you asked that question. So the technique, which a lot of people are now starting to use, is a layering technique that I started with by mistake. I carved a piece early on in late 90s and went to color it, and I dyed it with aniline dye and it looked like crap. So I started like putting acrylic paints over it to try to soften out that color, that bright color. And it started bleeding through a little bit, and it bled through in the deepest points. And then I just kept highlighting, and it created the process that I do. So on any of the pieces that I create, there's at least 25 layers of color. And I stopped counting at 50.
Well, how do you mean 25? What's the order of layers? What's going on there?
So a piece starts like, so this is carved, not finished, but carved. So you can see there's all these little textures.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to switch cameras for a second for you. Let's see what we can do here.
I've got you on full screen right now, and I've got a gallery that I can see above. I don't know if everybody else sees it.
Okay. So here's a texture. This is a partial piece. It's not finished. I'm not home. So there's still some texturing to do in here, but you can see this is all the burnt surface. So once it's burnt, and I'm using that as a sculpting technique. Now I have to be able to color this. I can't control anything that's dark and light by layering. So the first thing I do is I turn the whole thing black. I India ink the whole piece so that every little nook and cranny is covered in black. And that's so there's no hot spots. And once it's black, now I call it my black canvas. Then I can make it any color I want. But I have to start with black because all the deepest points are going to be darker. So I start with the black and then I enhance with colors, working my way up to the lightest color.
What's the tool?
The tool is a paintbrush.
Not an airbrush.
Not an airbrush. I have airbrushes. I never use them. So this, can you see the cabinet?
Not yet. We're still seeing the other camera.
Oh, sorry. Thanks.
Hey, this has gone very smooth. Don't worry. There you go.
It's tough when you don't have an assistant.
Yeah.
I need a Vanna. So this cabinet right here is just filled with all my acrylic paints, the ones I use the most. And I like to keep them in sort of the color order so I can get to them faster. But that's the acrylics I use. I use a lot of the golden. So this is golden matte finish fluid acrylic.
Okay. Do you dilute them? You must dilute them.
No, these are fluid. So the viscosity of these are like half the thickness of a regular artist acrylic.
Okay, so it's like it's not watery, but it's not gooey either.
That's right. It's not quite what you would want to put in an airbrush.
It sounds like it's closer to what you'd get out of a paint can of like conventional enamel. Like syrupy.
Yeah, well, here, let me see if I can. You know, the consistency is, it's not syrupy. It's a little bit heavier viscosity than syrupy.
Like gravy.
Yeah. You know, it's more like gravy. That's probably the best.
Your camera's shut off here somehow. We've lost you.
Sorry. Come on.
There you go.
So So it's not, it's not pasty, but it's not watery either. There are some more airbrush type acrylics that are more, the viscosity is, so this is a golden high flow acrylic, which means that it's, sorry.
Okay, there you go.
High flow acrylic, which means it's just, it's got a thinner viscosity. So it's much thinner, it's more like water. So it's like black water. Whereas this is probably double that.
So what about brushes? Well, you got one hair brushes, two hair brushes?
No, believe it or not, I'm using these very moppy brushes. Trying to get to the camera, sorry.
I see them.
Okay, so these are sort of the brushes, the mainstay that I use. What we call these are deer foot brushes because they look like a deer's foot. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Finding a spot. So this is the brush I use the most. Now, I used to make these brushes for myself so that I could get the, use it for this technique. But then I found some brushes that are made this way, and they're always going to be better because they're nice and clean cut by a professional brush company versus me with a scissor. But in a pinch, I can also make one if I need to. The shorter bristle allows me to basically do this. I take the paint, I pick it up on the brush, and then I unload it. So I'm actually loading and then unloading so that there's not a lot of pigment, so that when I color it, see that if I went to a finished piece right now with that much paint, it would be too much. I would flood the texture. So I have to unload a little more. Yeah, that's still a lot. Less is always more in this technique.
So the idea is to make the colors so thin they're translucent and the one below shows through.
Almost. It's almost that. And that the layering, just going to switch back here. The layering is because for me it's so many layers because I want it to be enhancing the texture so that it looks deeper than it really is, and I can then what's the right word? I can have the piece evolve in color from one end to another. So this is a piece that I did with Mike Lee from Hawaii, and so it's his carving or his form, and then I textured it and sculpted the opening and did gold leaf in color. So this one actually has a lot of transformation in color from like a yellow to an orange to a peach. And that is not only from layers top to bottom, but layers from ends to end. So having a transition in color so that it looks like it grew out of something versus one straight color. The other thing about making these pieces look like they grew themselves is the scale of what I say, the form within the form. So here it's very pointy, so they're very small feathers, but they're pointed, they're longer, they're elongated. As it comes around to the rounder point, they get larger and rounder. So they're mimicking what's happening on the surface.
Wonderful. Now I have a couple of questions from the room. One is, how long do those paints last? Do they have a shelf life?
So golden acrylics are probably, well, they're the most expensive and they last a pretty long time. The less expensive ones, like if you buy fluid acrylics from Blick, any of the hobby type ones, Joanne or whatever, all those other ones, they're all, their shelf life is not as great. But golden lasts pretty long time. I don't think I've ever had a golden acrylic that I've had to throw away because the shelf life was bad. So pretty long. And the thing about golden is that you get what you pay for. They field test their colors for UV breakdown and quite a bit of stuff. Excuse me. The other thing is they also do I'm going to grab another bottle here. So every time you get a golden acrylic, it has a color of paint on it on the label, right? That shows you the color. That's the actual paint from the bottle or from the vat. So somebody sits there and brushes on all the labels for that vat. And then on the back, it tells you how transparent or how opaque it is. It tells you how matte or gloss it is, how thin or thick it is, and how high or low the tint is. And there's a UV light fast code on the bottle as well. So it tells you quite a bit of stuff. So for longevity, for work that you want to last for a long time, we now know that acrylics will last quite a long time, and the breakdown of this acrylic is minimal. So unless you're putting a piece of my work in a direct sunlight in a window, I feel confident that it's never going to change.
Lovely. Clifton, what's your question? Clifton, can you turn your camera on, Clifton, so we can see you? Yeah, what's your question? You're muted, buddy. You got to unmute.
Mute. There we go.
There we go.
Jack.
Clifton, you're my past student, Clifton.
All right, let me turn this off again.
No, leave it on. We want to see you.
No, I'm just kidding. Yes, as a matter of fact, from Aramont.
Yeah.
One of my favorite classes. There's a few classes that if I could take them again, I certainly would, and you're one of them.
Thank you.
Anybody who thinks about going, go. But anyways, you covered a lot of the dry brushing, which is something I'm still having a little trouble with. Less is more. But the value fading from one color value to the next is what I'm having the most trouble with.
So, explain what color. Tell me an example.
So if I'm having a dark green and I want to lighten that up into a where would I go? Maybe a yellowy orange, coming out of the dark green in the background, coming up into maybe an orange or something to lighten it up, and then obviously getting back to the dark green, but getting those colors to not have the wrong value in the progression.
Yeah. So here's the trick to that. You were doing well in your color spectrum until you turned to orange. So if you think of green, you say, what is green made of? Green is made of blue and yellow. So now you can go from green to a yellow, or you can go from a green to a blue, but you can't go from a green to an orange because there's a red in there. So to keep things simple, you want to think about your end product. So I don't have a green.
So you kind of go from one color to the next around a standard color wheel.
Almost. I mean, all right. So this piece has it actually has an orange finish, but it's green. But to get to the orange, I had to hit yellow first. So you have to go from so you go dark green, lighter green,
yellow,
a lime color, a yellow, an off-white, and then another yellow, and then a light orange. That's the only way you can get to that. And I would say, forget the orange. Just to start, keep it in the same spectrum. So here's another problem. Sorry, guys, but most of you, especially as you get older, are going to lose your sense to see color. I'm sure there's a few of you who are colorblind. Unfortunately, men have more color blindness, and you can't see color the same as everybody else. It is an issue because, and I learned this from teaching. So I have a class of, average 65-year-olds, and guys are wanting to go from purple to green or from red to green. And I go, you can't do that. It's like they don't blend together. When you put red and green together, you get brown. So there's an issue. I realized there was an issue of people seeing color. So that's the first thing. You have to learn how to, if you can't see color correctly, you have to learn how to see color. Both of my sons are colorblind. One of them has a problem with the green spectrum. So he does not see this green. He doesn't see this green. He sees, he either sees it as yellow or green. He doesn't see it as a lime green. The other son can't see brick red. He can see brown and red, but he can't see brick red. So what I see them doing, and they always use the right color, is they're reading the label of the pencil or the crayon or the paint bottle so they get the right color. So in that instance, they're not mixing as much color as I would mix, but they're still getting the outcome that they want in most cases. But Clifton, back to your question is, you have to just, like we say, less is more. It's also do it in less steps. So really, so black, and the next color, you shouldn't even see you put it on. So really dark green, and then slightly lighter green, and slightly lighter and lighter and lighter. And then when you get to the lightest point, you have a direction to go, either to a blue side or a yellow side. So instead of going from green to yellow, so if this is your highlighted green and you wanted to go to blue, you could do this.
Right. Got it.
And that might be a really nice enhancement, but it's going to make it more turquoise versus yellow. So
you really have to go adjacent steps around the color wheel to do it, to get from one color to the next.
yeah, until you're really proficient. Yeah.
Now we got a question from Karen who'd like to return to carving tools. Could you show us your burner?
Yeah, sure.
And is it your main tool? You don't use gouges, or do you? Knives?
You know, if somebody asks me to, I do, but I don't. If I could use just the wood burner, I would. What I do is so you have to think of all this as in multiple steps. So I go, let's say wood burner. Let me see if I can find one here. This is a good example. Okay. So this one actually, this is an older piece that I started carving a while ago. So this one I actually used a reciprocating carver to hog off material. Then I take the wood burner and I actually sharpen all the edges with the wood burner and finish all the surfaces with a rounded burning tip. So
what's the wood burner look like?
Well, we'll show you. So it took several years for us to get this going, and COVID didn't help much, but this is the unit. So it's called prescribed burn. And the reason it's called that is because I used to be in the forest fire service. And what we would do when we had to prevent a fire is we do a thing called prescribed burn, where you back burn a field or a forest so that you burn out the fuel before it's an issue. And because I teach a lot in France, we also named it the same. It's the translation of a prescribed burn is écubrûlage. And it's the #2 unit because we started with a single-sided unit. This unit actually is a wood burner and a micromotor. It weighs less than 2.5 pounds. It's about 2.3 pounds. It has a PCU plug like a computer. So this can plug into anywhere in the world as long as you have the right socket on the other end. So it runs automatic, 110, 220, doesn't matter.
And what's the handpiece look like?
So this is the handpiece. And at present, I'm building these handpieces from scratch. So it is, so it's a make your own tip type of setup, 2 little terminals, a insulated, uber insulated handpiece, and very heavy cable that's very flexible. So you don't heat up your cable, you don't burn your hand. I'm sure most of you have used the burner and you go, wow, it gets really hot. In fact, I just sold one of these units to a gentleman locally who he was using a dual-sided burner, and he said, well, when one handpiece gets hot, I just turn it off and use the other side. I was like, okay, we can fix that problem.
So if you sell these, how many? What kind of production are you in, and what do they cost?
So we're right now we're in a very limited production. So I have 3 levels of units. I have, let's see if I can get my thing here, my little chart. So a basic unit that you get a wood burner, a control unit, a CPU plug cord for US 110, a micromotor handpiece, and this is a brushless 50,000 RPM handpiece, and a burning one of these, a handpiece for the burner. That's the basic set, which we call a red card set. And that's because the first thing you do in forest firefighting is you get trained to be a red card thing. And then second level is hot shot, which is you get all of the last stuff, plus you get a package of wire, a couple tips, and this is the best thing ever. So this is a adapter so that you can go from our proprietary plug to the 1/4-inch RCA plug, and you can still use your old wood burning handpieces. Mm-hmm. And then the third set is a pro set, which is you're getting a couple more cutters, rotary cutters, and cleaning brush that I customize. So I actually carve the brush, and that goes in the set as well. Carve it and color it. So you kind of get a mini example of my work.
And what's the price range here?
The prices are $650, $750, and $900, depending on the units. And if anybody's interested in that, I can send you all that information in writing by email very easily. All you have to do is email me at jvesery@gmail.com.
I saw you had that thing heated up. You're going to do us a little demo?
Sure, if you want.
Yeah, we got another question from Troy, but are you okay with hanging on a minute, Troy?
Give me 1 second. I just got to get one thing.
You got that tip white hot.
Yeah, so I want to show you how. Oh, so all right. So here's the deal. Everybody that's used the wood burner knows that you touch the wood, the tip draws the heat out of the wire, and you almost have to wait for a recovery time. There's barely any recovery time with this unit.
And how deep are you going there? It looks like about a 1/16.
Right now, I'm actually doing an open space that's probably like 1/8 of an inch.
And you're okay with it bursting into flame as you go?
Well, it depends on what I'm trying to do. Most of the time, if there's a little flame, it's okay. It also depends on the material.
And this is your primary carving technique?
Yeah.
And so the wood is kind of black when you're done anyway, so then you paint it black.
Right, but it's never completely black. It'll have, anywhere from tan to black.
Do you brush the char off with a wire brush?
Yeah. Yes, and that's the other thing that you get in the kit is the wire brush. I'm going to grab one in a second here. So the wire brush, this is not a finished wire brush, but this wire brush is a ultra soft bristle brush that's brass, and it's used in the jewelry trade for making jewelry. A lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, I have a really soft one," and I say, if you don't have this one, you don't have a soft one. And the key to this is this brushes the char out or the carbon very nicely. It doesn't abrade your surface. It cleans everything up really nice. And I usually use the same brush to clean the tip. So I actually work with two brushes, one on the bench for cleaning the surface, and then one on the back of my hand for cleaning the tip off.
And so you're not, are you going to go in there with the micromotor and do any carving as well, or is this your your main technique?
Yeah, so there's times where I jump back and forth. So that's what's nice about having the dual unit. It's all right there. And for teaching, especially for me, having something that I can take that's light and multi-use is really good, especially when I'm going overseas.
Are you teaching? Are you currently teaching in the States?
I have a class of, I have a master class coming up at Aramont in November. I believe that class is already full. I'm going to be at the Chicago Symposium, Regional Symposium in July, where they call it Turn On Chicago. I'm going to be teaching at a new school in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and it's not going to have any wood turning, but it's going to be all this type of technique. So burning, texturing, coloring.
So yeah. people can get in touch with you and follow you, or in the AAW journal, things coming up, and find out where you're teaching. Yeah,
I would always say contact me direct, because I'm not in habit of feeding information to AAW per se. And I will be demonstrating next year for them if we're able to do it in person at Louisville.
Okay.
So.
Nethaway, you got a question? Troy is from Susquehanna Woodturners in Harrisburg, and you're still muted, buddy.
Should be okay now.
Yeah, go for it.
Your paintbrushes. I've got a lot of acrylic paintbrushes. What was the name of those, and a source, if you have it handy off the top of your head?
You know, I don't have anything off the top of my head for sources. There's several places that I can get them. I don't remember. I always have them written down somewhere or in the computer. But they're the basic brushes. If you want a natural bristle brush, usually hog hair is better than the synthetic, and it's called a deer foot brush. And let's see, Royal makes them, Princeton makes them. I forget who else.
You'd be going to artist supply.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I ever found one, it was in an art supply store.
Yeah.
Since then, I've searched them out online.
Yeah, I was just looking in Dick Blick, and they didn't have anything like that.
No, they. You know what? Actually, I think Dick Blick does have them. They're hard to find though, because they're not like the mainstay of brushes. So if you look up soft grip Royal brushes, you'll find that company makes 3 sizes, and I've used all 3 sizes at any given time.
And the brass, the
soft bristle brush comes from Rio Grande Jewelry Supply.
Okay.
And last question, the pole behind you, that's not for dancing. What's that off your right shoulder there?
So where I'm sitting, there used to be a dentist chair. And it was because for years, my wife said the way I carve, because I actually lean back and I work with the work right here, so the smoke's not in my face, the light's not blocked. She said, you need a dentist chair. And this was a joke for like 5 years running, until a friend of mine said, my friend has a dentist's office that just burned down, but all the equipment's good and they're going to knock the building down. And I went, great. So I got a dentist chair out of it. And this pole is all that's left of it right now, because it's the light.
Oh, okay.
So
Now, that's a great light, but do you have a smoke extractor as well, or do you just, or a blower? What do you do about the smoke?
I actually have three things. I have a little, all of them are basically homemade. I have a little computer fan with a charcoal filter that sits near where I'm working. I have another ambient air filter built out of computer fans. It's on the ceiling. Then I also have an exhaust fan that vents stuff up to out of the building.
So you're not breathing that smoke?
Yeah, very little, very little.
Could, while we're at that, could you give us a little quick tour around your shop? I understand you spent a few years in a submarine, and what I'm seeing looks like it's kind of a submarine setup.
Yeah. All right. So since you mentioned that, I have to switch back to a screen share for a second here, and show you something. Okay. And John, you asked about like what I'm doing lately.
Yeah.
This is actually the art I've been doing most recently. I'm taking old nautical charts and putting artwork on them. And
flat painting.
What's that?
Flat painting.
Yeah. So it's not painted. It's all pen and ink and pencil. But I've had a lot of commissions of that stuff.
It's beautifully done.
Okay. So after high school, I joined the Navy and was on a submarine for 4 years. So that gives you a little taste of what it's like to be on the submarine. And directly after active duty, I stayed in Hawaii because that's where I was home ported. Stayed in Hawaii, and I became the Zamboni driver at the only ice rink in Hawaii. And so I went to this, they were opening this new ice rink. It wasn't open yet. They were still building it out. And I went there and I said, I'm looking, maybe I can work with you guys. I can skate, whatever. They said, what have you been doing? I said, I've been driving a submarine. And they said, oh, that's kind of like driving a Zamboni. So you could drive the Zamboni. And I was like, it's not like driving a submarine. It's not like it at all.
But then you became a scrimshaw artist.
Yeah, and so while I was in Hawaii, I got exposed to scrimshaw because on Maui, there's a town called Lahaina, which was a whaling port in the 1800s. And so there's a tradition of scrimshaw that comes out of the whaling community. And I learned some scrimshaw. I had done it before I was in Hawaii when I was a kid, but I really picked it up there. And I was doing it full time all over the country. And then legalities in the early 80s changed with possession of ivory, and I went back to wood. So,
I'm tempted. We only got a few minutes left, and I wanted to see around your shop, but I also really wanted to ask you about collaborations. You've done a tremendous number of those. So, which one would you want to do?
All right, you know what? I think I'd rather show you this. Go back to the screen share and show you some of the collaborations because there's some really fun stuff.
What I'd like to know is what do you get out of it? What's so fun about collaborations for you?
So part of it is the camaraderie with somebody and the energy that you get from working with someone else. But for the most part, what I found is that collaborations give you growth. So these are the most collaborations that I'm known for are with Bonnie Klein. And Bonnie pulled this kind of stunt with me where we were both going to be in Georgia at a regional symposium. And she sent me an email like a week before the symposium and said, I think we should do a collaboration for the symposium. I'm going to send you 2 tops. One for practice and one for a finished piece. And I was like, with a week before the symposium? So the day before the symposium, I made both. And I said to her, first off, I don't practice. And secondly, I finished both of them. So we auctioned them off and there was a huge success, but then we started giving them to the AAW. I don't have a picture of the first one, but the purple one coming out of the egg. Are you guys seeing that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that one auctioned for $1,800 at the symposium. I think it was 2001, maybe
2002. It says here.
Okay, 2002. Then the following year was going to be in Louisville, Kentucky. And I said to her, okay, I'm going to give you some specifics I want you to do. And she turned the objects. So obviously in this picture, the 3 unfinished pieces are the parts that she turned. And this piece you'll see in a second. So this is part of the piece for the Louisville event, which was put me in, coach, I'm ready for that. This is owned by Dave Long. Now this one auctioned for $11,750.
My word.
Steve Sinner said to me, I brought it to the symposium, I put it on the table, and he said, that's going to sell for $10,000. And I said, no way, it's a toy that's 6 inches tall. Well, he was kind of right. And then the following year, somebody said, well, how are you going to top that? But and we went to Portland, Oregon, and we made this one.
I saw that when I was in Portland.
Yeah, and that one auctioned for $20,000.
So you had another ball glove covered in leather.
Another what?
It looked like.
Yeah, right. Another leather piece. Well, okay. So when talking about collaboration, so this was the first time I carved leather. And I went, this is really cool. I'm going to do this again. So I would not have thought about the leather texture probably if I didn't have a theme or something that challenged me into doing that. So that was really a really important thing. So this is another one with Bonnie. This was it for Richmond. And that's all out of historic woods from the Richmond area.
I saw that one too. Yeah.
That was, I like that one a lot. I really enjoyed doing that one.
I'm amazed by the intricacy of the detail on that one. That's just beautifully done.
Thank you. And then
I like that it has a little bit of visible wood. That's unusual.
Yeah, so right. And so there's times where I find that's appropriate and there's times where I find it's not. So depending on what, I don't force myself to show the wood unless it works for the piece. Actually, I'll show you an example of that. So this is a piece I did with, 2 pieces I did with Grant Priddle. And on the one, showing the wood was appropriate. It was good looking wood. And so I did the leather and then had the regular burl showing, and that worked out pretty well. So one of my favorite collaborations, this is an earlier collaboration, and that was with Hans Weisflog from Hildesheim, Germany.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Exquisite piece.
Thank you. Thank you.
I love the Weisflog's work anyway, and to see it integrated with your work is really astonishing.
So the same year that we did that collaboration, Hans, Mike Lee, and myself were all doing solo shows at Del Monte. And we decided that we would all do collaborations for the solo shows because technically 3 people doing a solo show at the same time is a 3-person show. So we did the piece on the right was started by Mike Lee, and then he sent it to Germany, and then Hans turned the center, and then he sent it to me, and I did the coloring and carving and texturing and the base, and then I sent it to LA. So it almost made it around the world.
We're right on the hour. I suspect there's there's 53 still on screen. I expect let's go to a gallery view for a second, get an agreement to hang on for a bit. Is that okay with you, Jack?
It's fine with me. I don't have anything pressing.
Okay, I got a gallery here. What do you guys think? Would you like to carry on for a little bit? Give me a wave of hand. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's have more questions. Or else we'll go back to looking at collaborations. I was very intrigued.
So,
John,
you want
what's your color progression for the leather appearance?
So it depends on the color of the leather I'm going to finish, but black to start, then very, very dark brown, and then adding some lighter tones to bring that up. But if I'm going for more orange, like a saddle leather, then I'm going to start putting in things that have that really burnt orange tone. And there's actually a color I really like to use from Golden called, it's the weird, it's so technical, the name, it's crazy. It's called quinacridone nickel azo gold. I'm like, you couldn't call it burnt orange? No, like, come on.
Questions from the room? Anybody else?
Can you tell us about the teepee?
Yeah, can you see it out there?
Yeah, I saw it out the window.
Yeah, so we have a teepee. Let me see if it with a, why aren't we tracking anymore? Let's see. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, there's a teepee in the backyard.
Yes.
There's almost always been a teepee in our property. Started when the kids were little, and when they were in high school, we didn't have it up for a while. But then my youngest son came back to live here for a little bit, and he asked if we could put it back up. So it's just another part of what we call Camp Jack and Minda. I have a climbing wall on the side of my shop over here outside. We have an archery range, a tomahawk throwing range, a trail into the woods with a footbridge and a marked trail into the forest behind us.
How big is your shop? There was a picture of it in AAW that I couldn't find that I remember.
Well, so it's changed over the years. It used to be a 2-car garage, and it was always going to be the temporary shop. Let me see if I can show you around here. Let's see. I got to zoom out for a second. I love this camera, except it doesn't stop.
Yeah,
okay.
That's the trouble, is getting control of these things.
There it goes. Okay, so are you following me? No.
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah.
Okay. So, hardware store, all color coded, so I can find things really easy, but I don't label everything because I don't want my neighbors always getting them. I have people that drive past the hardware store in town and come here for stuff because they say, well, it's easier to find. You just know where it all is. Here's one of the lathes. Let's see if we can get it to come to the lathe. So this is my main lathe. This is a Stubby 1000. Love this lathe. So versatile, way heavy. Just.
Are they still made, do you think?
I don't think they are.
I don't think so.
I think if you're buying them secondhand.
Yeah.
And then I have this ladder so I can get to everything on these shelves. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
So that's removable. Bandsaw, sanders, a little bit of hodgepodge over here because of the projects that are going on. Because I do have one of my sons living at home now. He's teaching locally at the high school, so he's saving some money. The other lathe, this is a modified General 160 that I cut the bed off. I had so many lathes at one point. I said, I don't need another long bed lathe. So I cut the bed off and made it a traveling sort of mini bowl lathe, and it works out pretty well. And then
you got a bunch of rollout machines under the shelf there, it looks like. I see a planer.
all like table saw, planer, all that stuff that I only use for housework or cabinetry or any of that stuff is all under the bench, plus some metalworking tools. We actually built a forge out back during COVID. Drill press, one of the best things ever, my metal lathe. So I'm using this to make all the parts for the wood burners. So like, here's all these hand pieces that I'm working on right now.
So what kind of a metal lathe is it?
It's a South Bend, which I inherited from my dad.
I used to have a 742 South Bend. It was a lovely machine.
Yeah, it's a great. You know, if people go, well, what do you do with the metal lathe? That's how you turn metal on.
I turned wood on it. It worked fine.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah.
Actually, John, when my dad had he had a little machine shop, and I used to use the lathe in his machine shop for turning wood. So this is the bench where most of the carving and texturing happens. So I got my wood burner down here, and that's the new unit. I actually have the older unit over on that bench for my son to use, or when I have somebody I'm teaching and stuff like that. But I sit here with my feet up, and I've got a lot of bright light over here. Light is really important. I actually switched the lighting in the shop last year or the year before to all LEDs.
do you have a drawing set up as well, or do you draw do you draw at all?
I draw, but I don't draw like on the work, and I don't draw like the piece of the work I want to make. But I have sketchbooks. I'm in volume 5 of sketchbooks, which is kind of fun. COVID really pushed that for me. I did a lot more drawing during the beginning of COVID. Yeah, that's about it. It's a pretty small space, but so it was a 2-car garage, and it was going to be the temporary shop. I was going to build a building out off the, on the property away from the house. Started looking at cost and said, that's not going to happen. That's crazy. It's a waste of money. So kept the 2-car garage going, took out the doors, put in a wall with windows and whatnot. And we were renovating the kitchen. And I said, my wife and I really wanted a mudroom, because in Maine, you need a mudroom for the skis and all that stuff. So I compressed the shop by 1/3. And everybody I knew said, you're crazy. You're giving up shop space? And I said, you know what I lost? I lost a couple things. I lost the ability to host a woodworkers meeting here. Not a bad thing. I lost the ability to teach more than 2 or 3 people at a time locally here. And the third thing I lost was storage space for stuff I was never using anyway. So I store a little bit of my wood in the basement of the house, and that's about it. I upgraded my compressed air system about 5 years ago. Well, I got a bigger compressor. I said, well, I don't want it to take up space in the shop. I put it in my basement. It was easier to wire down there anyway. And I just ran the piping into the shop. So it works out pretty well. So that's pretty much the space.
Okay.
This bench is new. This bench had moved out of the space when we had the dentist chair in here. And the dentist chair was great for carving. The problem with the dentist chair was it was too comfortable. So I would sit down and start working and then go, maybe a nap.
I know how that goes.
And that was bad.
I have a couple more questions and comments from the room. Ray Simmons says stubby lathes are still made in Australia. So
Okay.
they could be had, but you'd have to ship. Ken Vasco asks, what was the moment when you said, I can do this for a living?
Well, so when I moved to Maine, my wife was a resident. She's a family doc, and she was doing her residency here in Maine. And we had our first son, and I was the stay-at-home dad. And I said, that's when I said I could do this for a living part-time, because we agreed I was going to be the stay-at-home dad. And then we had our second son 4 years later. And the day I said I could do this for a living full-time was the day the school bus picked 2 of them up. And I just jumped for joy. I went, I can work from 9 to 3.
Now, do you mostly sell through galleries, or do you sell directly to patrons?
I do a plethora of things, and more recently, because of the illness, I haven't been supplying that much work. But I do when I can, I supply galleries. Delmano, when I did Delmano before they closed up, everything I sent them, they sold. I couldn't keep up with the demand with them. I did several other galleries at the same time, but more recently, I've done a few gallery exhibits, mostly more the ones where it's the on-call, a call for entry kind of thing, so a site-specific or a theme-specific. And then I also supply a couple local galleries once in a while when I can. We actually, there's a new nonprofit gallery in our town called the Peace Gallery, which is for veterans. And so that they're gonna have pretty much work all the time. They're going to mostly have the chart pieces, though, the flat art. I think that'll do well there. And I do have some fun news that I've been sharing. In May, the Renwick Gallery, which is the branch of the Smithsonian that does decorative arts, they're having a 50th anniversary exhibit that they're opening. I think it's May 15th, 13th or 14th, something like that. And a collector has donated a piece of my work that's going to go in the permanent collection there. So that's kind of nice.
Are you going to be in Chattanooga?
I am not going to be in Chattanooga. Sorry to say. Because I do this for a living, I tend not to be able to go to events, wood turning events, where I'm not being paid.
Got it.
You know, that's kind of the way I've always looked at it. And part of all of these things, like even the big collaboration projects I did for World Wood Day, my wife and I have an agreement. It's like, yeah, you can go if you're going to be making money. If we're going to lose money, you can't go. You know, that's just because as much as people go, oh, look, he sold a piece for $20,000. Well, that was a donation. Bonnie and I didn't get anything out of that. So, you know, there's the stigma of people thinking, well, you're an artist and you sell things for a lot of money, but you don't make a lot of money. So that's the truth.
Well, that brings me back around full circle here, because you've agreed to do this with us for free today. We are totally nonprofit, and I'm totally grateful. It's been a wonderful hour and a quarter.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to do it. So
Thank you, Jack.
Is there any more questions from the room before we wrap it up?
Yes, I'm a bit of a doubting Thomas. Unless I can put my hands on those leather pieces, I can't believe it's wood. The question I have, I believe you, but the question I have is, are the lacings wood as well, or did you revert to leather lacings for those?
I'm going to go back to it and show you. There's only two materials used on that piece. The two materials are cherry and acrylic. There's nothing else on that piece. And here you go. Here's a detail of that piece. So there's the top, the removable cap or cover, and that's the palette it took to make that piece.
So you take a lot of pleasure in the illusion of, I pick that up, it's going to be wood in my hand, and it looks like leather.
Yeah, it's going to be stiff. It's going to, well, here, I
think you like that.
Yeah.
So
that's the one.
So these are one piece each. Okay, they're 3-inch spheres that I enjoy this series a lot. I call it diversity in the round. There's a whole slew of them. This series, all of the pieces come with a 5-inch base that is magnetized. So there's a magnet buried in the base underneath, and there's a magnet buried inside the sphere, so that wherever the signature is, you put the piece back on the base, and it's solid there. It's not going to roll off. It's not going to get bumped and roll. So that gives me stability and longevity for the piece, and makes me feel better about somebody owning that piece. But you just go and pick it up and it comes off. And here's another one. So this is also one piece of wood, except for the base, of course. So that was a piece I did because I was asked to be in an exhibit that was the theme was transportation.
Bicycle.
And I thought, well, I'll do a bicycle ball. So that was turned with, so I turned the sphere and then I turned the grooves to create the plates like the gear plates. But then everything else is carved.
I assume the roller chain spindles don't turn.
Nothing turns on this piece. It's all one solid, but it doesn't turn. Nothing turns.
Just kidding. That's fabulous. Unbelievable.
We still have 45 on screen. Let's stay with you while you show us whatever slides you'd like to show us.
Sure. Okay. So this is one that a lot of people thought, okay, there has to be a leather stitching on that. So this was a piece I made for the Louisville Slugger. The Louisville Slugger Museum had an event where they had their museum hosted the AAW doing a baseball themed event. And that was in conjunction with our symposium that was there in 2006. And so I did this piece. So it's all wood burned. So you're actually seeing the wood. It's Swiss pear. You can see the wood, but burned in all these little branches and twigs. And then on the bottom, you can't really see it in this image, but in the bottom, every once in a while in one of the branches, there is, I put all the baseball stadiums ever built in the United States. So at the pitcher's mound, right at the rim or the foot, it starts with the oldest baseball stadiums, and some of them are not there anymore, like Ebbets Field, and it works its way out to the newest baseball stadiums.
Huh. Tiny writing.
Very tiny writing,
Yeah.
especially when the piece is only 16 inches in diameter. So this is the kind of piece where I finish it, and my wife said, "You didn't put enough on the top. You had to put more stuff on the bottom."
Was that writing done with an ink pen?
No, that's all burned in. It's all wood burned in. This is another sort of favorite. This was done in conjunction with an exhibit that I co-curated with a man named Bill Jewell from Fredericksburg, Virginia. He passed away, unfortunately, but he was collecting and selling historical woods, mostly from his area. And so he asked Bonnie and I if we would do a collaboration with his wood. And then from that, this exhibit grew. And this is the piece that I did for that exhibit. So this is all relating to George Washington. The interesting thing was that I couldn't say no to working with George Washington woods, because when I was in elementary school, I went to George Washington Elementary School. And the town I grew up in, New Milford, New Jersey, is a town that George Washington slept in several of the houses, the Revolutionary dated houses in our community, because there wasn't a lot of housing, and he was working his way from New York to Valley Forge at the time. Then I joined the Navy, and I was on the USS George Washington. I was like, okay, I got to do a George Washington piece. So this is one piece of wood up to the African blackwood rim. This is all carved in the surface. Even the little nails are not nails. They're actually, it's all carved in. This is a chart of Mount Vernon that was sort of like a plot plan of the housing and the buildings that was done by a friend of George Washington's who was visiting there for a summer from England. And he went home and did this document and sent it back to George Washington. And the Mount Vernon Society actually found it and bought it back, and it's hanging in Mount Vernon right now. This other one is the survey chart that George Washington drew before he bought the property. So before he was an officer or president, this is what he was doing before that. He was a surveyor. And this is a copy of that original document that he used.
And those are in the wood. Those aren't decals.
So everything from that rim all the way through here is one piece of wood. It's cherry from Mount Vernon, and it's cherry and acrylic. That's it. And then up here, this piece, this blonder piece, is a piece of chestnut. This piece is documented that George Washington planted that tree, because in Fredericksburg, where his mother and sister lived, after he was president, he wanted his family members to be able to walk to each other's house in the shade. So he planted 13 chestnut trees on the main drag from his mother's house to his sister's house. And those trees have died off over the years, but the last one prior to me making this piece was cut down, and Bill got that wood. So I have wood that's actually planted by George Washington. I use it very sparingly. I also used African blackwood on this piece to represent the fact that George Washington had slaves from Africa. So I thought that was an appropriate part of that piece as well.
What's the blue bead about?
The blue bead is to represent the sky and sort of looking towards the future, getting away from those bad habits that we had as a colony. That was sort of another little hidden treasure for me to put that in there. So it's painted like the sky.
And the moss is painted on too, or the moss is carved wood?
Yeah, the moss is carved except for the part that goes across the African blackwood. That part is added to those pieces. So this is all carved part of the cherry, but this, from this point, well, from that point, right from that rim point up, that's actually added with acrylics and paste and mica chips to create that illusion.
I was wondering how long you had to let it sit outside for the moss to grow on it.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
What's the symbolism of the moss?
Well, I've hardly ever seen a tree that doesn't have some kind of lichen growing on it. So yeah, and technically it's not moss, it's lichen. Here in Maine, we have lichen on all the trees. So I have good examples of that all around me.
And it also is about time moves on, you know, leave things outside, they
Yeah,
get covered with lichen.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, and think about this. So when you look at this piece, do you think about, oh, it's carved to look like bark? When you see it with the lichens on it, it tricks your brain into thinking it grew this way.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, in fact, I had, so I'm going to show you some teapots. So this is one of the first bark textures I did, was this teapot. And I had a woman come up to me and say at an exhibit, she said, so how long did it take you to find a tree that grew like a teapot? And I was like, well, a lot of time. It took me a long time, you know, like, come on, really? Let's see. Oh, you know what?
I'm going to take a moment here to pass on some comments that have come in on the wire. Alan Miller of Lancaster says, these pieces are great and thanks you very much. Joan Sauvageau says, amazing work. And Ken Vasco says, just an observation, I hope your health returns so you can continue to create more beautiful wood pieces.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm on that note, I'm doing better. I'm finding a balance. I have to I can't overdo it. The other day I did a little bit of log cutting for some firewood, and the next day I was toast. So I just have to learn to pace myself a little bit better. And I've worked on that for the last few years. So unfortunately, CFS rears its head every once in a while and you get a relapse. And I had a year and a half of where I couldn't do anything. And in fact, the first year and a half, so 2011 into 2012, a good day was if I showered and answered 2 emails.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I can't remember most of that time frame because the memory loss goes along with it. But yeah, I'm hoping to make more pieces. So
last few slides. We'll take 5 more minutes.
Okay, this is here. So never thought about making a teapot. And what happened was in the year 2000, Celestial Seasonings, the tea company, the herbal tea company in Colorado, they had been doing a competition / exhibit for 4 years that was like a teapot exhibit. And then on the 5th year, they decided to switch it to teacups. And I said, I'll do a teacup, but I didn't want to make a piece. And they had a proviso in their competition that you could send in a good drawing of a piece. So I sent this image to them with the 3 options, and they picked this piece. So then I made this piece, and then they put it in the exhibit. And every year that they've done that exhibit, they buy the 3 top pieces out of the exhibit and they put them in their permanent collection. So this piece is on exhibit in Boulder, Colorado at Celestial Seasonings. But because of that piece and because of the intrigue of doing a form like a teacup, I made this piece as well. And I sent it to Delmano Gallery for their hot tea exhibit, which they sold it. But Jan Peters, who was one of the co-owners, she was like, I can't sell teacups. I need teapots. So that was I said, all right, next year I'll make you a teapot. And so then I started making teapots.
Just a second here. How many hours is in one of these pieces? Any idea?
So I don't know. My wife always says the answer to that question is countless hours. I don't keep track. What I do is I work on a piece until I feel I need to stop. And sometimes I put them away. Sometimes I don't go back to them for months or years because there may be something that I'm struggling with. So I'll stop, I'll put it away, things will evolve, and I go back to it. All right, so talk about how long things take. Here's a collaboration I did with Mark Spheric. So we were doing it was also for the Louisville Slugger Museum exhibit. And I said, let's do a collaboration for that. And I said, send me a funky bat, you know, his bats, right? So he sent me four of these 12-inch bats with bumps on them. And I was like, what the heck am I going to do with these? Within a half hour opening the box, I carved the bark one and I finished it in 4 hours. So I go, wow, that was really quick. Now, I think the other two probably took me, 4 weeks compared to the first one that took 4 hours. You never know. You never know. But I will say this, one thing that's important to me about or interesting to me about the textures, and I say this when I teach, a lot of people want to learn how to do the feathers. And I say, yeah, you can do feathers, but the feathers take the longest and they're the hardest to do. They're the easiest to color though, because there's so much texture there that the paint catches on the highlights and you can highlight the piece very quickly. Whereas it's easier to carve the smooth surfaces like the lily pads, but it's 10 times harder to color it because there's no place for the paint to catch. So they take twice as long to color than the feathered pieces.
Do you ever get tired of feathers? You've made millions of them.
Well, I don't. I'm intrigued by them, but I also like to do things that are different than feathers. So here's another collaboration. This was the last collaboration I did with Bonnie. And this was for a book and an exhibit called Boxes and Their Makers. I got a call from the person who was doing the book for, I think, Fox Publishing or whatever it was. And they said, we want you in the box makers book. And I said, I don't make boxes. They said, no, but Bonnie does, and you guys collaborate. So these are box tops, and there's some variety for you on texture. Boy. So I'm always, a lot of people will say, oh, you're the feather guy. And I go, well, no, I can't, I want to do any texture that I can think of. And so the stone, the leaves, whatever it could be, I want to play around with it, the leather. I have a whole bunch of, I'm going to do a denim piece as soon as I can get in the groove again. Do you have a favorite piece, a favorite slide for the last slide of the day? Yeah. I think that's my favorite. That is gorgeous. That's one of those pieces where I went, we shouldn't have sold that. I should have kept that. That was a very fun piece to do. And then when I photographed it floating in the air like that, I was like, oh man, that was just so great. That's a beautiful, beautiful piece. Thank you. And this was another one of those examples of being like the spheres and being able to remove them from their bases. Part of the intrigue to me is having people interact with the piece and be able to pick it up. So this rests on the stand, but can be removed by the viewer and held, and something that's tactile. It's important to touch it. It's important to see how it feels. And that's just another component to all of this stuff that we do. So
Jack, you really
end the share, please, Jack.
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry.
Jack,
and I'm going to go down to a gallery.
You don't ever really sketch ahead of time. You just start working right on the canvas of wood.
Yes and no. There's the only time I draw on the surface is if I'm doing the C form itself. So let's see if I can find one. Oh, you guys are getting a special view here. All right, so here's a C form that I'm working on, but this is a special C form because this is a collaboration with somebody. Bin Fo always said to me, let's collaborate. And I would say, Bin, it's going to be really hard for us to collaborate because we both do color and texture. So after a while, we discussed it and he said, send me a C form. So I sent him a C form and then he sent it back to me and I did some texturing on it and then I sent it back to him. And then unfortunately he died. But this is a collaboration with Bin. So there's a good chance that I'm going to finish this and bring it to Louisville for the auction next year.
Fabulous.
So this is an example of where I would draw out the spirals that I'm trying to, that shaping where it's the shaping of the form going from classic form to this. I'm going to draw that out because then I have a guideline to sculpt to, because this line kind of goes around like this and has to fade away. So it's very sharp here and then blends out. But the guideline just gets me started. And then I cite all the segments of the bands coming around to make sure that they look appropriate, that they're fairly equal and fit the form as best as I can possibly make.
Well, on that note, I'm going to say, Jack, this has been a fabulous hour. I thank you very much, and I think let's have a round of applause. We've still got 36 on screen. Let's have a round here.
Fantastic, Jack. Unbelievable.
Thank you so much.
Well, my pleasure, guys. My pleasure.
Thank you so very much. And this brings to a close Woodturners Coffee Hour for this week. We'll see you all next week, which will be a show and tell week.
Thank you, Jack.
Wood shop. Thank God for wood.